Is Tampa in a real estate bubble? I don't think so, but let me explain. If you're new to the channel, thanks for coming by. I'm Sam, and here at the Living in Tampa channel, we make videos about what it's like to live and move to the Tampa, Florida area. If that's something you want to follow along with, don't forget to subscribe down below. Also, we are a team of realtors here in the Tampa area, so if you do have any need for help finding a house, making the move, please reach out to us. Our phone number and email are right there on the screen and in the description down below. There's a lot of talk about a real estate bubble right now, and for good reasons. There are some parts of the US that are what I'll call bubbly, but that doesn't mean that everywhere is. And I think some of this problem is actually just stems from black and white thinking that it's either in a bubble or not. And a lot of us grew up in the midst of the last bubble, the 2007 crash, and maybe you bought your first house during that, or you saw your parents really suffer to recover from a property losing value. So it makes sense that we are cautious. But this kind of black and white thinking about the housing market is really not helpful. And let me talk about all the factors that I see influencing the real estate market and whether or not there is a bubble. Okay, so these factors, I'm gonna rattle off a bunch and just list them here. So we have the global economy, we have the national economy, we have the local economy in each of these areas. And then recently we have the foreclosure ban, we have the eviction ban. Then we have the stock market, how this affects people's income and future income and retirement accounts. We have the commodities market right now. A big shortage of palm oil in Indonesia is actually going to affect more things in the US than people realize. Then in the midst of that, we have consumer confidence. Are we feeling fear or are we feeling greed, and where do we fall on that scale? In the midst of this, we also have interest rates, not just mortgage interest rates, but bond interest rates, overnight loan interest rates for banks. Like that's a little more complicated than just mortgage interest rates. Then on a local level, we have job markets. What's the future of job markets in these areas? What's it based around? Is it tech? Is it consumer defensibles like groceries? What is the job market? And then as the undercurrent of all this, we have supply and demand. And all of those factors actually affect supply and demand differently. That was actually one of my favorite things in college economics classes, is realizing what changes affect supply, what changes affect demand, and which way those curves move as these things happen. But let's talk about the bubble. What is the defining feature of a bubble? The defining feature of a bubble is when people make purchases because they think prices will go up in the future. When that is the main factor that is driving a purchase. And I tell you, like for my clients, that is not a very big factor at all. Occasionally people are thinking, I want to retire in Florida in 5 years. I want to go ahead and buy a place. So I have one because of course prices are going to go up in the future. And that's more of like thinking, okay, real estate prices are going to go up because historically they go up. So they want to go ahead and buy. But I was talking to someone yesterday, Lucia, and she wants to move here from the Chicago area because her chronic migraines are better in the Tampa area than they are in the Chicago area. That is a very different decision. That is not a bubbly decision. And what that's called when people are buying because prices are going to go higher, it's called rational exuberance. They are spending more than they normally would, and they're rationalizing it by saying prices will go up in the future. And let's think about that behavior for a little bit. So if you think prices are going to go up 20, 30% every year, and therefore you're spending 50% of your monthly income on housing, thinking, well, eventually my income's gonna go up too, and I'll be spending 30% or 20% of my income on housing. That kind of rationale is what drives a bubble and what inflates a bubble to the point of bursting. So I also have some kind of anecdotal things, and I want to call them anecdotal because they are not really data-driven things that help me to think that Tampa is not in a bubble. One of the things right now being talked about in some of these markets like Denver and San Francisco and LA is the price to rent ratio. In some of these markets, the cost to own a house if you purchase it right now is significantly higher than the price to rent a house if you rent it right now. Tampa is not that. These prices are really kind of neck and neck in the Tampa area, with rent usually being a little bit more. And in a healthy housing market, that is what you want. You want people to convert from renting to buying and feel like they're actually lowering their costs a little bit. Another thing that is a factor in these bubbly markets is price to income ratio. And this is a problem in Tampa right now, actually. Incomes have not grown as fast as housing prices. And that is causing the Tampa market to be too expensive for some people that have grown up here their whole lives. But that's not uncommon in a metro this size in the US. So let's talk about why prices have increased so rapidly for the past few years and why we're in this place we are now. A big part of why prices have increased so much is because of the foreclosure ban and eviction ban. This has kept houses off the market. This has allowed people to stay in their homes. This has violated real estate contracts to protect people from getting kicked out of their homes in the midst of a pandemic where they may have experienced some job insecurity or something like that. If we look at the supply and demand curves, this foreclosure and eviction ban has reduced the supply. On top of this, we've had an increase over the past 5 years of institutional buyers like BlackRock and Open Door and Zillow for a while and OfferPad. And these buyers have bought a lot of houses at a time. Progress Residential is another big one here in the Florida market. These institutional buyers have actually changed the housing market for a longer term than you think. So whenever they buy these houses, they pay top dollar for them because it's a very safe asset on their books when they're doing other things that are more risky. And because they're looking at holding the property for so long, they're thinking of the lifetime value of the property. They're not trying to make a quick buck on it. So whenever they pay top dollar for this, they're not really fazed. But then the biggest way that this has changed the market is that typically those houses would come back on the market every 5 or 6 years if they were owned by individuals. Now they will come back on the market every 10 to 20 years, but then they'll come out in big chunks and they'll move from one investor to another. They won't even go on the market a lot of the time. And that is going to cause a very long-term tightening of supply. And I don't know how we're going to get out of that. If those are all turned into rentals and not just like speculative investment properties, then, it might boost the rental inventory, but then we still have to make up for it in other ways. But overbuilding is what caused problems in the past. And so builders are skeptical and investors, economists are all skeptical of what's going to happen because of that. So what's going to happen next in Tampa? And of course, this is just my opinion as a local real estate professional in the area and as somebody who's talking to people every single day that are moving to the area, typically for a better quality of life. That is usually why people are moving to Florida and the Tampa area. And so let's talk about what I think is going to happen over the next couple years. Personally, I think there will be a steep decline in the rate of price growth. That doesn't mean a steep decline in prices. So last year, prices increased about 20 to 25% in a lot of the Tampa area. If that gets cut in half, that's a 50% reduction in growth. So that would be, 12, 15% growth. That's not a reduction in price. And as that goes down and down and down, in a healthy market, you want that to be in the single digits. You don't want that to be so excessive. But as that goes down, price growth will be a little bit more predictable and we can work around that. But that is not a bubble bursting. That is not a crash. That is a very different thing. But overall, since the 2007 crash, the market is different, with the government intervening more in all kinds of ways, with institutional investors having very cheap access to debt to purchase all of these homes. This whole market has changed. And these cash buyers that are disguised as institutional investors, they're not cash buyers. They have cheap debt. So they have maybe a line of credit with a big institution where they can buy these houses for cash, and it looks like cash in the transaction, but they're financing that on the back end so they can do it over and over again. So the whole thing is a little bit of a mess right now, but I don't think we're gonna return to the housing market that our parents talk about. I mean, hopefully we'll never return to those early 80s high interest rates. My dad bought his first house in Denver in 1983 and his interest was 17%. And I've talked to all kinds of clients and people that, maybe them or their parents, their first house was at that kind of interest rate. So hopefully we don't go back to those old days and we find a new normal in the midst of this. As I said, if you are interested in moving to the Tampa area, we would love to help you or help you process the move. Everybody has different goals in this process, whether it's a specific quality of life or it's schools for your kids or anything in between. We would love to process that with you. Our phone number and email are right there on the screen and in the description down below. And I look forward to any questions any of you have, any comments you have. Maybe you just think I'm crazy, you think I'm wrong. That's fine too. Comment down below. Let's keep the discussion going down there. And thanks for coming by.